Bom, muito boa tarde a todos. Estamos começando o Seminário de Economia Política do Sistema-Mundo, que vai durar 3 dias. Eu gostaria de agradecer a realização desse seminário, à Decania do CCJE, ao Instituto de Economia, ao Instituto de Relações Internacionais e Defesa e ao Centro Celso Furtado, que possibilitaram a realização desse evento. Esse evento ele é uma parceria de 4 laboratórios: o LEHC, que é o Laboratório de Estudos sobre a Hegemonia e Contra-Hegemonia, o LabChina, coordenado pela Isabela Nogueira, o LIERI, que é coordenado pela professora Garcia, e o LEMARX, coordenado pela professora Carla Ferreira. Em tempos de crise, há que se inovar e, portanto, esse evento é marcado por esse esforço de solidariedade, esse esforço coletivo de aproximação entre esses laboratórios. É um evento dedicado aos grandes temas. Nesses dias falaremos sobre imperialismo, falaremos sobre capitalismo contemporâneo, falaremos sobre Sistema-Mundo, falaremos sobre América Latina, sobre China, sobre Europa, sobre periferias, sobre liberalismo, sobre fascismo e sobre socialismo, e sobre movimentos sociais. E isso é assim exatamente porque nós entendemos que a universidade pública tem que se situar como um espaço de vanguarda cultural. A universidade pública, ela não pode se subordinar aos limites do mercado, sobretudo quando o mercado vai se apresentando como um mercado que produz cada vez mais monopolização, exclusão e pobreza. Então, esse evento é marcado por essa perspectiva de orientar a universidade pública para as grandes necessidades culturais, educacionais e sociais do nosso povo. Sendo assim, eu passo então a palavra para o professor Davi Kupfer, que é diretor do Instituto de Economia, e vai nos fazer aqui uma saudação de abertura do evento.
Então, quero dar boa tarde a todos. Vou fazer uma breve saudação, acho que não deveria além disso, dizer a satisfação do Instituto de Economia de participar dessa cooperação entre as várias instâncias mencionadas aqui pelo Carlos Eduardo, né, e os laboratórios, especialmente o LabChina, que é integrado ao Instituto de Economia. O Instituto de Economia agrega entre seus programas de pós-graduação um programa em Economia Política Internacional, que talvez de todos eles, não sei se será um exagero, é o que enfrenta desafios mais amplos em termos da construção de novos modelos teóricos de interpretação da realidade. Porque, embora o nosso programa de economia também lide com grandes complexidades e o programa de políticas públicas e desenvolvimento tem uma agenda extremamente extensa de temas a cobrir, eu tenho para mim, como economista industrial mesmo assim, que a economia política internacional é hoje algo que traz questões bastante novas em termos das próprias forças que estão criando uma dinâmica um pouco imprevisível em termos do contexto internacional e dos processos relativamente paradoxais que estão se entrecruzando nesse momento e que eu imagino que serão discutidos e aprofundados nesse seminário. Então, um seminário de grande importância. Eu entendo que cabe à universidade um papel fundamental de produzir conhecimento que permita interpretar os fenômenos e, principalmente, preparar a sociedade para lidar com esses fenômenos, encontrar saídas concretas para que própria organização global possa prosseguir num modelo compreensível, né? E principalmente se possa ter capacidade de atuação política sobre esses determinantes. Então, essas são rápidas palavras. Eu queria cumprimentar os organizadores que fizeram um trabalho pesado de botar isso aqui em pé, que só quem organiza um seminário sabe como é trabalhoso e difícil, né? E como coisas tão simples algumas vezes se tornam tão complexas, né? E, portanto, cumprimentando aqui a Isabela, o Catu, o Wilson e os demais aqui, a Ana Garcia e a Carla Ferreira, eu saúdo a todos e desejo que o seminário seja bastante produtivo para todo mundo. Obrigado.
Bom, muito bom dia a todas e a todos. É uma grande satisfação participar da mesa de abertura desse seminário sobre Sistema-Mundo, sobretudo em conjunto com tantos amigos e, sobretudo, nesse contexto de crise e transformações estruturais na economia política internacional e no Sistema-Mundo da forma como a gente conhece. Então, os desafios que são colocados nesse momento são extraordinários, absolutamente extraordinários, e os efeitos que são sentidos em países periféricos, como o Brasil, são igualmente dramáticos, né? Igualmente dramáticos. Então, nós já fizemos esse diagnóstico e essa interpretação em mais de uma situação, e parte do desmonte e parte do momento dramático em que a economia, a política, a sociedade brasileira e latino-americana passam hoje se deve às mudanças nas placas tectônicas internacionais, né? A gente tem mudanças de grande monta, a gente tem desafios de possíveis transições hegemônicas em curso, de grandes paradigmas tecnológicos que estão sendo colocados e repensados, e competições interestatais que vão se apresentando para países periféricos como o Brasil, que são extraordinários. Então, esses seminários, esses 3 dias, são feitos para isso, para a gente pensar, tanto fazer um diagnóstico criterioso do que é que está acontecendo, qual é a situação do Sistema-Mundo internacional nesse momento, e, a partir disso, que tipo de estratégia por parte da periferia a gente pode imaginar daqui para frente. Então, o Carlos Eduardo já fez uma longa e extensa lista de agradecimentos. São muitos laboratórios envolvidos, um apoio extraordinário, muito importante, institucional, do Instituto de Economia, do Centro Celso Furtado, de muitos outros parceiros. Eu queria só agregar aqui também o papel do grupo de Sistema-Mundo de Santa Catarina, na figura aqui, sobretudo, do Pedro Vieira, que, numa parceria muito generosa, infinitamente generosa, permitiu a vinda do Christopher Chase-Dunn aqui para o Rio de Janeiro. Então, é esse tipo de parceria e esse tipo de colaboração entre os diferentes institutos críticos e, claro, entre os diferentes laboratórios, que é essencial para que uma agenda de pensamento crítico, de alternativas e de construção, né, de novas perspectivas se torne efetivamente possível. Eu aproveito também e agradeço o trabalho extraordinário de uma equipe de estudantes sempre assim, exemplar, para lá de incrível, que na verdade é quem toca a organização. A gente só faz cara aqui de que está fazendo alguma coisa, mas quem realmente toca a organização dos nossos seminários são os alunos. Então, muito obrigada ao Pedro, aos alunos que estão ali cuidando de inscrição. Muito obrigada à equipe também aqui no Instituto de Economia, o Cirenir e o Guilherme, que dão um apoio extraordinário. Então é isso, muito obrigada e bom evento a todas e a todos.
Boa tarde a todos e a todas. Em nome do Laboratório Interdisciplinar de Estudos em Relações Internacionais da Universidade Federal Rural do Rio de Janeiro, eu saúdo a vocês, agradeço a oportunidade de mais uma vez estar aqui em parceria com o LEHC. Essa é a segunda parceria substantiva que nós temos. Nós fizemos há 2 anos atrás, tivemos a ousadia, né, de fazer 2 anos atrás um evento chamado Marxismo e Relações Internacionais, que rendeu muitos frutos, né, amizades e parcerias acadêmicas. Nós então vislumbramos naquele momento, né, um segundo evento próximo, né, a ideia é que a gente consiga realizar no ano que vem algo similar, mas nesse meio tempo a oportunidade de estar trabalhando junto aqui no Seminário Economia Política do Sistema-Mundo é muito importante. Tal como a Isabela, eu queria agradecer fundamentalmente o trabalho que a gente chama de trabalho invisível, né, dos estudantes, alunos e alunas que fizeram isso aqui acontecer, e destacar aqui o papel dos alunos e alunas que vêm lá de Seropédica. Eles falam que eu cheguei da viagem, né, aqui estavam dizendo, tomaram ônibus, metrô e trem para chegar aqui e poder estar apoiando, né, nessa infraestrutura e atuando junto com os alunos da UFRJ aqui nesse evento. Então, queria agradecer a esse trabalho que é muitas vezes invisibilizado, que torna o evento possível. Nós temos, acho que, 3 dias de um evento muito produtivo, eu espero, né, como os outros já disseram, não custa repetir, o mundo está de cabeça para baixo, não tem outra expressão, acho que mais adequada, né, com aqueles atores tradicionais desse Sistema-Mundo atuando de forma avessa, como sempre atuaram, novos atores entrando, um mundo em transição e um país efetivamente também de cabeça para baixo, com um desmonte, né, da política pública, como nós estamos vendo. Então, mais do que nunca, o papel nosso aqui na universidade pública se torna fundamental. Então, eu desejo a todos um bom evento, estaremos aqui nos próximos 3 dias, e obrigada pela presença e pela parceria entre nós.
Boa tarde a todas e todos. Em nome do Laboratório de Estudos sobre Marx e a Teoria Marxista da Dependência, da Escola de Serviço Social, eu quero agradecer imensamente a possibilidade, a oportunidade dessa parceria com os laboratórios, o LEHC, LIERI, o LabChina, o Apoio do Centro de Estudos Celso Furtado, do Programa de Pós-graduação em Economia Internacional aqui da UFRRJ, dos demais envolvidos na organização desse seminário, bem como os estudantes fundamentais para a realização, né, de tudo que a gente tem aqui hoje, que torna possível esse nosso encontro. Dizer que da nossa parte, nós como o mais jovem laboratório da mesa, nós que há 1 ano estamos nos construindo aqui na Escola de Serviço Social com uma disposição muito grande ao debate, entendemos que este seminário é uma oportunidade de reflexão e de articulação do qual nós participamos com todo o interesse, no sentido de aprender e contribuir do ponto de vista do pensamento crítico, da crítica da economia política, das relações imperialismo e dependência, incorporando a perspectiva da classe, da luta de classes em escala mundial, na perspectiva da emancipação humana, e pensamos que este espaço, assim como outros que esperamos poder construir juntos, possam contribuir no sentido de uma articulação da classe trabalhadora, dessa classe trabalhadora em escala mundial, que precisa, mais do que nunca, mais necessário e urgente do que nunca, construir uma alternativa sociometabólica para além do capital, para o planeta, para a vida no planeta. Então, essa é a nossa disposição ao debate, um debate que nós pensamos é um desafio a todos nós, partícipes do pensamento crítico, enfrentar este século XXI que se apresenta a partir de uma perspectiva científica que necessariamente precisa ser coletiva e plural para dar conta dos desafios postos. Então, essa é a nossa disposição. Queremos desejar a todas e todos um seminário exitoso, articulações e reflexões que possam contribuir nesse sentido. Mais uma vez, agradeço a possibilidade e a oportunidade de estar aqui com vocês.
Boa tarde, eu sou Luiz Vieira, sou professor de Estudo de Economia da UFRRJ e atualmente também exerço uma função na Decania do Centro de Ciências Jurídicas e Econômicas como coordenador de extensão. Estou nesta mesa na qualidade de representante do Centro de Ciências Jurídicas e Econômicas. Quero, em nome desse centro, ressaltar um fato muito importante. O centro participou, junto com o Instituto de Economia, junto com o Instituto de Relações Internacionais e Defesa e junto com os laboratórios, dessa profícua, dessa rica parceria para poder fazer, gerar, fazer frutificar, fazer acontecer esse seminário, que cremos será muito bom, será muito importante para o debate, para a reflexão do que está acontecendo hoje no mundo. Eu gostaria, então, de agradecer a presença de todos e todas, agradecer essa parceria, agradecer não só dos professores que estiveram juntos nesse processo, do laboratório, dos laboratórios, do CCJE, dos institutos IRI, IE e dos alunos, mas quero também agradecer a presença de todos e todas nesse debate, que seja realmente muito rico nesses 3 dias. Agradeço e convido agora todos e todas para assistir à conferência de abertura do professor Chase-Dunn.
Bom, estamos aqui então abrindo a conferência inaugural do nosso evento, que será pronunciada pelo professor Chase-Dunn, que é professor da Universidade da Califórnia. O professor Chase-Dunn é um destacado representante da teoria do Sistema-Mundo, que é um enfoque que começou a se desenvolver nos anos 70 e que tem no próprio professor Chase-Dunn um dos seus principais expoentes, mas também em Manuel Wallenstein, Berger Silva e outros grandes expoentes também que podemos citar, que não estão vivos, Giovanna Higg, Terence Hopkins, André Gunder Frank. E aqui no Brasil também, Teotônio dos Santos, um importante intelectual que articulou a teoria da dependência a esse enfoque. Então eu convido vocês a escutarem a conferência do professor Chase-Dunn, que vai então se iniciar.
Thanks, Carlos. So, this paper is a work in progress. I'm working on it. And some of you have been able to see copies of the written version, but it's evolving. And it's a project. And I'm really proposing a vertical project here. Okay. Who am I? I'm a sociologist who has studied world systems for a long time, and I'm part of the Political Economy of the World Systems Project, which is a strong representation in Brazil, but it's really a lot of different places. What I do most of the time is study the evolution of world systems. So I use world systems, that is what we now have as a global system, as the unit of analysis, but I go back in time and study how international systems in the past worked and compare that with what's going on now. The paper that I'm talking about today is really a political project, and it's a proposal, but I want you to help me think about it. But in order to do that, we have to think about the global system as a political system, and what I'm talking about is politics at the global level, okay? So I'm not talking about Brazilian politics, I'm not talking about the politics of the United States, I'm talking about politics at the global level. Now, in my understanding of the history of the modern world system, there's always been politics at the level of the whole system, but we don't normally think about it that way. Although world system people do, to some extent. The other strange thing here is I'm really not talking about the entire world polity. I'm talking about the global left. Okay? So I'm addressing a proposal to the global left, meaning those people who are activists, global activists on the left. I'm working on another paper about the global right. I'm trying to understand it. That's not the paper I'm going to talk about today. But I'm also understanding the left as something that's actually been around for a long time, and I'm going to be talking about that. The crisis that was mentioned, I agree with what the earlier speaker said about we're in a global crisis which has been created by the modern world system, and we need to, in order to think politically, we need to understand that crisis. But my paper today is really not an analysis of the situation, although I will mention it as I'm going along. I'm more laying out some things that I think we need to think through, which are mainly matters of political theory and the sociology and political science of organizations about how to organize a political instrument for the global left, a global political instrument. So I'm not really, the earlier topic or title of the paper was about united fronts and stuff like that. I'm not talking about united fronts now. You can't have a united front unless you have an organization that can be part of a front. And there is no organization, so the proposal I'm making today is about the creation of a global political organization. Samir Amin, who was one of the founders of the World System Perspective, just died. And he was a protagonist of the Global South, of the farmers of the Global South. And he was one of the creators of the World System Perspective. He's an Egyptian Marxist economist who worked mainly in Africa, but he was one of the founders of our World System Perspective. And the last article that he wrote was really a rewrite of an earlier piece that he'd written about proposing the creation of a fifth international. Okay. The fifth international is basically a communist international, like the third international was, and that was the model that Samuel Reed had in mind. He didn't get into details in this proposal about what exactly he meant by that, but those of us who have studied the history of the global left know quite a bit about the Third International. Okay? It was a global political party of communists, but of workers and peasants and women and students. And it was created by Lenin in 1919 or 1920. They had meetings for 10 years, mostly in St. Petersburg and Petrograd and Leningrad, and then in Moscow. And then it became kind of a tool of Soviet foreign policy. Okay, Stalin took over and so on. But in that 10-year period, it was a global political party of communists who were trying to make a revolution in the world. The evolutionary significance of that is that for the first time, non-elites were doing global politics. Because before that, there had already been global politics, but it was basically statesmen and churchmen and scientists who were elites who were doing it. The Jesuits were a global political party that emerged in the 17th century. Okay? There had been people doing world citizens whose arena was the whole system for a long time. Just it's a small number of people. Well, it continues to be a small number of people. How many people think of themselves as world citizens? Yeah, not that many. Now, that doesn't mean that the only people that are involved in world politics are the ones that are conscious of it. Because everybody's involved. When they're objectively part of a larger system, they're involved. Everything they do has consequences all over the place. And everything that happens to them, it comes out of that system. But I'm talking now about those who are conscious, who see the world as the arena of political struggle. Okay? And what's been happening in world history is the evolution of political globalization. More and more people do see the world as the arena And it's related to economic globalization. Economic globalization in the sense of integration. So this has been going on for a long time. It's not really new. I mentioned the Third International, but I have an idea that I need to introduce in order for you to understand my paper. So this is my textbook. Please buy my textbook. Unfortunately, it's in English. But what it is a history of the evolution. It's about the evolution of world systems since the Stone Age, since we were all nomadic hunter-gatherers. Okay? There were world systems of nomadic hunter-gatherers that were already living in systems, international systems of polis that were mainly hunter-gatherer camps and autonomous political organizations that are interacting with other autonomous political organizations. They were different, and what the evolutionary perspective does is see how the structure of world systems evolved. Basically, they got bigger, they got more hierarchical, and they got more complex. The modern world system is just the outcome of that. It's a process of globalization in the sense of integration, interaction networks getting larger, that's been going on for 10,000 years. That's what my textbook is about. Okay? I wrote a whole book about a world system that existed in Northern California before the Europeans got there. So it's indigenous world systems. The word world means a different thing when you do it that way. It means the world of the networks that the people are involved in. And when you go back in time, those networks were small. What happened was they got bigger and it became global. That process is something we all need to understand because we're still involved in it. The other idea that I need to introduce in order to explain my paper is the idea of world revolutions, that we can, when we use the world system as the unit of analysis for understanding politics, what we see is there have been waves of rebellion that occur at different places in the world and that have consequences for the economics and politics of the world, and that this has been going on for hundreds of years. Okay? In my understanding, the East Asian world system was basically a separate system from the European-centered system until the 19th century, in which case the two came together. China got integrated into the now global Europe-centered system. But before that, there was an East Asian system in which there were already world revolutions going on. Okay? I'm working on that, but I don't know too much about it, but we have a session in November in Phoenix about the world revolutions in the East Asian world system. What a world revolution is a bunch of rebellions occur in the same period of time. And sometimes, often, the rebels themselves don't know about each other because they're in different places of the system. But the ones that know about it are the ones who are at the top of the system because they have world colonial empires. So they know when rebellions are occurring in a bunch of different places, and the rebellions are linked to each other through the hierarchy. So it's often a multi-centric hierarchy. The European core states have different colonial empires, but they're competing with each other. And they know when the other ones are having trouble. And how much trouble they're having influences their ability to compete with one another. So these world revolutions, when we start trying to figure this out in terms of history, we talk about the Protestant Reformation as a world revolution that had huge consequences for the evolution of the modern world system. One of the consequences was the Dutch hegemony, which was religion has always been politics, and still is. Okay? Yeah, the terminology of political contestation in the 16th century, the time of the Protestant Reformation, was religious. It's about religion. But religion is a discourse about authority. It's politics. Okay? And that world revolution, the emergence of the Protestant Reformation, was about politics. It was in part an anti-colonial struggle. Those parts of Europe that weren't under the Spanish Empire that existed at the time were rebelling against Catholicism and creating modern culture, basically. The idea that you don't need a priest to know what the Bible says. Well, it was helpful that Gutenberg had invented the press, and now everybody could, and they could translate the Bible into the vernacular, and everybody could read the Bible themselves. That helped a lot. But it's the beginning, or actually a step in the democratization of the hereafter and authority relations and everything else. Okay? Things like that occurred, not just in Europe, occurred a lot of different places, and the Protestant Reformation wasn't just in Europe either. Then there was a big period of contestation. The next one I'm going to talk about was 1789. Now, 1789 was the big year of the fall of the Bastille and all that. But when you look at global politics, what was going on was the American Revolution in the United States, the Haitian Revolution, the French Revolution, and a lot of things happening in the revolutionary Atlantic. Okay? It was a rebellion of slaves and sailors and pirates and all this stuff going on at the same time. So, and there was a popular rebellious aspect within the structure of the creation or the evolution of these colonial empires. Really amazing rebellions took place. The Haitian Revolution was a bunch of slaves heard about the French Revolution and said, you know what, we want to be citizens too. And then they took over Haiti. And they managed to repel a huge French army that came to get them back. And that had huge consequences for the United States because Napoleon sold Louisiana to the United States because he couldn't reconquer Haiti. And then it's still having consequences, okay, for world politics, that rebellion. The point is that there was these things going on. The World Revolution of 1917, which is to some extent we're still in, is the Russian Revolution, but it's also the Chinese Revolution and the Mexican Revolution and all these things that were happening at the same time. There was a rebellion going on in the world, and every time you have another world revolution, the issues are different. It's different groups of people. Okay? It's a complex mix of different movements. But what happens over time is they get more and more connected with one another. By the time of 1917, the radio has just been invented. Okay? Lenin buys a radio and takes it to St. Petersburg and then gives lectures to the workers of the world. So now nobody has a receiver, but he doesn't care. The evolution of communications technology is already happening. We have the telegraph, all this stuff going on, and people, not just elites now, are communicating with each other. Lots of people are. There's a popular aspect of these world revolutions. There's also a culture of each world revolution. Each one has a culture. It's about certain kinds of issues that are going on. 1968 was a world revolution of students, but workers got involved in different places. But it was a really important world revolution, and it's the one I'm going to be talking mostly about because the culture of the current global left was created in the world revolution of 1968. And my argument is going to be that in order to produce a useful organizational instrument for the global left, we need to understand the culture of the world revolution we're in. Now, the other part of the paper is about the motivation for this. Why am I talking about this now, okay? And I need to mention a couple of other things. Well, this slide is about the culture of the current global left, okay? My own situation is I'm kind of a 68er. I was in Berkeley in 1964, okay? Before most of you were born, but I was already a semi-adult at that time. after that, I was imbued with the culture of the 68 years, but I also came to understand more the world history and about what had happened in 1959. Became developed a better understanding and a better appreciation of the old left, because the new left, to some extent, was an attack on the old left. It wasn't just an attack on capitalism and stuff, and on imperialism. I mean, it was, but it was also an attack on the old left. The old left was seen as a failure, okay, because of Stalinism and all that, but also because the anti-colonial movement and the Soviet Union and so on. We're going too fast.
No, the microphone.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Sorry. The new left's culture was a reaction against an attack on the old left. And we're still living with that culture. To some extent, that's the culture we need to address. Okay? So Samir Amin calling for the Fifth International, that's probably not going to work. What that means to most people is Stalinism. Okay? So whether that's true or not, and my understanding of what happened is a bit different, which is that the Third International, at least for a period of time, was a really interesting project before it became a tool of Stalin. But just saying we want to do the Fifth International again is not going to work because young people see this as Stalinism, okay? So whether it's true or not. So we need to construct the idea of a political instrument that takes into account the culture that we are dealing with. And I'm talking about the culture of young people, not old people like myself, although I was part of the 68 stuff, which is where this culture came from. Basically, there's a bunch of elements of it that cannot be ignored. One is prefiguration, okay, which is kind of it's utopian socialism. That's not a new idea. Engels wrote a whole book saying this isn't going anywhere, and he was mainly right. Okay, utopian socialism happens all the time, but either gets repressed by some state or it turns back into the same mold. There are a few exceptions, and they're really interesting ones, okay? But that's the general story. So that's a story that we need to remind the prefigurations of this stuff, because they think they don't really know the history of utopian socialist movements, but they do need to know them, and also the recent history of it. My only point is we can't ignore this. Prefiguration is an extremely powerful idea. It's the idea that we together, here and now, in this group, can create a social structure which prefigures the world that we want to live in. Okay, it's utopia. It says we can do this. It's anarchists do it, but it's not just anarchists. It's all over the place, but it's part of the culture of the global left. So it would be dumb to just lecture these people and say you can't do this. So what I want to do is create a structure that encourages it and helps do it and integrates it and links it so that it's part of a larger political project rather than just this group of people finally figures out how they can do whatever they want. That's the trick, but the first part of it is don't just dump on these people. Tell them, fine, go for it, let's do this. Do an experiment, try it again, communicate with each other. The other piece of the culture of the global left is horizontalism, okay? The idea that you don't really need hierarchy anymore. And that hierarchy is always bad. It always turns into Stalinism. Okay. That's an idea that we do have to confront. But we need to also take into account the values and the usefulness of horizontalist organization. What it really means is self-organizing small groups, okay, that don't have hierarchy and that are flexible and that can change rapidly. This is a good organizational idea. And we don't need to get rid of it. We need to figure out how to do it and the other thing. Because the political logic which got extended in postmodern philosophy and post-structuralism was an attack on any form of counter-hegemony, any form of a claim to represent the interests of the whole, of totalism. So the problem is if you carry the implications of 68 to that extent, basically you've eliminated your ability to contest with power. You can't do it, because what it says is power exists at the level of language. And the best way to deal with that is to be confusing, which isn't too hard. Okay? But there is power at that level. Language is important. But a political project that's going to make some difference in the world has to figure out how to mobilize against the powers that be in the world and get organized to do that. So you can incorporate some of the world revolution of 1968 and also do the second thing. Now the other all right. What I do in this paper is I have been studying the social forum process since 1960, since 2005. Okay, a bunch of students and professors from my university went to Porto Alegre in 2005. I see the World Social Forum as probably the most important venue where the global left gets together and talks, or that's what it has been. And I come to my understanding of what are the contents of the issues and what is the actual structure of the movement of movements by studies that we've done of the social forum process. We did, I'm a sociologist, we do survey research. We did surveys at 4 different social forum meetings. One in Porto Alegre, one in Nairobi, Kenya, one in the United States, 2 in the United States, one in Atlanta, and one in Detroit. And we asked them a lot of things about who they were and where they come from, and income and education, and a lot of the usual stuff. But we also asked them, what movements are you involved in? Or what movement themes? We made up a list of movement themes. And we asked them to tell us, are you actively involved in which of these? Okay, so there's a list of 27 movement themes. Okay, this is doesn't include everything, but it includes a lot. Now we have for each survey about 500 respondents, and we can tell by which of these they checked how many, what percentage, but also which ones are connected to which other movements. Okay? So some people say they're involved in no movement. Some people say they're involved in one. If they say 2 or more, that's a connection between 2 movements based on individual participation. So out of that, we can see the structure of links among the movements. This is formal network analysis that we use in sociology. Okay? Up in the corner are the movements that didn't make the cutting point, because you have to dichotomize in order to produce one of these diagrams. So you have to have a cutting point, and some of the movements are pretty peripheral, and they don't even are not linked to the other movements, and those are the ones up in the corner. It's anarchism, communism, national liberation, autonomism, open source, and land reform. Okay? They're little movements. The diagram shows then the other ones that are less peripheral, but still peripheral, and then the ones in the center. Okay. The big point about this is it shows there is a network of movements. The other thing I would mention is, forgetting the dichotomy problem, when you look at the whole matrix, all of the movements are linked to other movements and are connected to this network. So the anarchists are connected to other movements and are connected to the networks. Anarchists complain a lot about the World Social Forum, it's this and that. But anarchists did come, and there were some, and the ones that came are connected to other movements. Okay? So there were no zeros in the matrix. All the movements are connected to the whole network of movements. The other thing to say about the network as a whole is it's a multi-centric network. There's a lot of possibilities in it. You could have separate cliques that aren't connected to one another. There's one single network here. They're all connected. And how centralized it is. You can have one movement that connects all the other movements. That's an extremely centralized network. Or you can have a multi-centric one, which is what we've got. The other point to make here is that we find pretty much the same structure in all the different venues that we studied. And we studied global social forum meetings in Porto Alegre and Nairobi, and national ones in the US. And we get the same result pretty much. It changes a little, but not much. Now, this diagram combines from three of our research things. So it's not looking at the differences, it's just averaging out those differences. I'm telling you, when you study the differences, which we have done, we also tried to figure out if there was change over time. There isn't much change over time. You get pretty much the same structure. Now, here's the structure. Human rights and anti-racism are always right, very close to the center. Okay? The other things that are there are environmentalism, fair trade, anti-corporate, alternative globalization. Feminism is kind of out on the corner there, but sometimes it's more central. So there's a bunch of movements that link all the other movements, and the one that links practically everything is human rights. Now, I'm using this for the purposes of the paper I'm giving today to try to figure out what's the structure of the global left. And I think this is a pretty good representation of it. A critique of that would be, well, is this a random sample of the people that attended the social forum meeting? Who knows? I think so. We tried. And is the World Social Forum really the right venue for studying the global left? And if you want to worry about that, the question would be, what is the alternative? I mean, there is no alternative. So. But that is an issue, because it's not really the whole global left, it's part of it. So there was a really excellent study by Manfred Steger and his associates of documents produced in the social forum process, where they do a content analysis of these documents. And what they're doing is trying to isolate what are the main issues that are involved in the global justice movement, and how is it organized and stuff. So they're looking for the main things that get repeated over and over again when they analyze these documents that represent the ideas that are being discussed in the social forum process. And there's two kinds of issues. One is sort of what are seen to be the right organizational strategies, and what are the contents of the issues that are involved. And they're both mentioned in these lists. And I use this also in my attempt to do two things. I'm doing two things. Trying to put together this proposal about the new instrument. One is about content, and I get that from this. And the other is about form, it's about structure. Frankly, I've worked more on the structure part. The content part needs to be improved. But I'm telling you, what I'm telling you here is where I got what I have. As I said, this is a proposal, okay? Right? So this is going to be a collective project, hopefully. I'd like to go to the next social forum meeting, if there is one, and have a group work with me on making this better. But it may be that the social forum process is over. I'm trying to find out. I know there was some difficulties at the last meeting in January. If it's over, then we need to have another social forum. And it might be time to, there was a big debate within the social forum from the beginning about whether it should be a venue for debate or a political organization. What I'm saying is, you know what, it's time to do a political organization. Now, the motivation for that is a bunch of other things that we're about to talk about. Why now? Why get off the, because we found out from our surveys, about half of the people thought it should remain a forum for debate, the other half thought it should take political positions and be a political organization. I see that the global left, like the world system, is to some extent in crisis. The social forum story is part of that, but it's not the whole thing. What we have is the rise of right-wing populism and neo-fascism in the world. Okay? Ironically, both the global left and the global right are responses to neoliberal globalization. They're different responses. But the way it came down in Latin America was the pink tide. It was a response to neoliberal capitalism. You could say, well, it wasn't a revolutionary response. That's true. But on the other hand, it was progressive and was able to use resources based on the price of raw material exports driven up by the rise of China to do a bunch of good things that helped poor people in Latin America. So what's happened to the pink tide is there's a reaction against it, which to some extent is normal parliamentary politics, right? There's cycles, but it's also a little different in places like Brazil and so on. I know you're all concerned about this, and I'm concerned about it too. We also have right-wing populism and neo-fascism on the rise in a lot of places, in the US, in Europe, and it's also, ironically, a reaction against neoliberal globalization. There was a bunch of people who didn't get included in neoliberal globalization. They lost. Okay. How about manual workers in the United States? They get screwed. Donald Trump is right about that. Okay. He's not really doing anything about it, but he's right to point it out. And there's a bunch of people that feel very unhappy. And that is also true in places in Europe. That's the economic driving force behind the rise of economic nationalism and right-wing populism and all that stuff. But it's not just that, because there's a status politics aspect to it too. It's also about race relations and about gender relations and all these things, which are connected in some weird way to these real economic things. People who feel that their status is threatened are reacting, and they're doing weird things. So we have the rise of explicit racism and explicit misogyny and all this kind of stuff in politics. And this is in part a reaction to the World Revolution of 1968, where those issues were important. It was the new social movements. There was a reaction going on against it. So it's a combination of the economic consequences of globalization and a counter-movement against the issues that the real changes in the status of white males and people are having a fit. So we need to understand that, because we need to understand the roots of the rise of the right. The way I'm using it for this project is, it's a reason why we've got to do this. Okay? We can't just have fun anymore at the World Social Forum, yapping and talking about what we would like to do and having our little thing about, our utopian project and stuff. We need to deal with the powers that be and the right-wing movements that are emerging. We need to have competent and capacious organizational structures that help us do that. And the formation of a global instrument of that kind can help people within countries and give them aid. So they're going to need aid. I don't have time to explain this one. It's really interesting, but that's all right. So there's bad news and good news. I think I just told you the bad news. In the US, these things are the good things. Okay? There was a huge spike of mass protests in 2011. It was a reaction to 2008. 2008 was the big global financial crisis. It started in the US, it spread all over the place. And there was a huge popular reaction against that, the Occupy movement, all that stuff. 2011 was a big spike in mass popular protest. Then it dropped off, but then it recovered. So the good news is there's still mass popular protest. The point I would make, and that other people make, is mass popular protest is not enough. You can't, it doesn't really, it has effect. It did change the discourse. The Occupy movement did change the discourse in the United States, but it didn't really, at least yet, have consequences for the structure of power. Now, I say yet because it ain't over. You have the rise of a new socialist movement in the United States. It's not at all dealing with imperialism and all that. They never mention that. They're worried about health care and stuff, which is a huge issue in the United States. Poor people are so screwed in the United States just trying to get health care. Okay? And most people agree with that, but the insurance companies pay the politicians and then that's it. So we never get any kind of decent healthcare system. Well, you know what, that can change, and I think it will. There's a bunch of things like that where these aren't, it's not the Democratic Party, it's the Bernians, okay? And those people, they're gonna probably do this. This is what's coming up. Now, I don't have any idea how it will all come out. It could be a mess. What we don't want in the United States is a civil war. I don't know. But it's not going to be pretty. And it's going to have consequences for everybody. And everybody's involved here because, yeah, it's still the empire. It's 782 military bases all over the world. Okay? That didn't go away. But how is that being supported? It's being supported because the United States prints world money. The dollar, oil is valued in dollars, and the dollar's world money, and our printing presses print world money, and that's how they're paying for all this stuff. Okay? Also, they make a lot of money taxing the financial industry, and financialization has been the response of global capitalism to the crisis of manufacturing and falling rate profit and all that stuff. So, the point to make about this is it can't last. The U.S. hegemony is declining. It's been declining for a long time economically, and sooner or later it's going to decline in terms of military power because it's so expensive. If they try to tax the people of the United States to pay for all that, it's impossible. Can't happen. No way. Okay? The only way it's possible is because the U.S. is living on the fact that it used to be the economic hegemony. And what that does is put you in the center of world money and the world financial system, and then you can live on that for a while until the BRICS and the other people who have some power rise up and they say, you know, we're not getting anything out of it, so let's do things a different way. And that come down is going to happen. It's scary because right now, the geopolitical situation of the world is very stable. There's one superpower and there's nothing else. Zilch. Zero. That's a very stable geopolitical situation from the point of view of war among states. But my point is that's going away and it's going to be back to something like before World War I. That what we need to do with our global leftist instrument is help the world get through a period of multipolarity without snubbing ourselves. If we do the first half of the 20th century again, we're done. Because we have enough weapons now to kill everybody. So we have to manage multipolarity without world war. And the Chinese and the Indians and the Europeans and the United States and Brazil and Mexico and everybody else has to be aware of this. If we just try to deal with the crisis of global capitalism by taking care of ourselves and stuff, it's going to be a huge Malthusian correction in which a whole bunch of people die. Now that's happened over and over and over again in human history, but never on such a scale. We need to do this. This is essential. And it's not going to be easy, okay? It's not a matter of just changing the meaning of words or causing, chaos for its own sake and stuff like that. We have to get through this crisis that's going to be in the first half of the 21st century. The good news is I'm going to be dead, but some of you will still be around, okay? This political instrument I'm talking about has to deal with this. You mentioned it, we call it imperialism. Yeah, it's imperialism, okay, but what I'm talking about is imperialism in the sense that we've had it is coming down. And now the question is, what's next? Is it world war? I hope not. Because we had a bad one, two of them in the 20th century. They were nasty, huge. But the one that could happen in the 21st century was much, much worse. This is not going to happen next year because we still have the 782 military bases. Okay? I wrote a paper in which I advocated that the U.S. should turn over all of its military bases to the United Nations. Well, that hasn't happened yet. But world system people think about the historical past and we think about the distant future. We don't think about next year or the next 5 years. We think about the next 100 years, and the next 50 years. Okay? Most people don't do that, but we do. We've got to get through this period and we have to manage a period of multipolarity. International organizations are going to be extremely important. So we can't just write them off. I know they're not perfect, they're not great, but they're a big part of our hope. And the other part is the left. The left needs organizations to contend in those international organizations and try to have sane policies for the human population. So I mentioned the pink tide, I mentioned the Arab Spring, that didn't turn out so well either. I heard think about that. I already mentioned Brighton stuff. Oh, deglobalization. Got it. Well, we've been, railing against neoliberal globalization for a long time, but I studied globalization since the last 200 years, quantitatively at the level of the system as a whole. And the main measure I use for economic globalization is the ratio of imports, global imports, to global GDP. Okay? So you add up everybody's imports, that's in the numerator, and you divide that by the global GDP. Following me here? Well, my study that was published in 2000 started in 1820. What you see when you start in 1820 is this. Okay? It goes up, but it also comes down. There's periods of deglobalization. There was a big wave in the 19th century, and then a decline, and then another wave, another big wave after World War II, basically. And it got higher than ever before. Okay? Really, this is a measure of large-scale economic integration relative to the size of the whole world economy. So what percentage of the world economy is international trade? That's what it's doing. And the line there, that top line, that furry one, is that. It's imports divided by world GDP. Okay, the big news here is, well, it's been going up since 1945 and it's still going up, but it doesn't always go up. Sometimes it goes up and sometimes it's pretty flat, and then it goes up, and then it dipped in 2008. It went down, and then it came back up, and then it started going down. Now, I don't know what that means for sure, and having studied a lot of these graphs, I know that when something goes down for a year or two, it might mean something, or it might not mean anything at all. It might come back up. So I don't know what's happening. All I know is, if you take this into account along with the rise of ideas about economic nationalism and all that stuff, that it may mean that we're headed into another period of deglobalization. Now, deglobalization is an interesting idea, but it's an idea that we need to pay some attention to. leftists like Samir Amin and Walden Bellow have been advocating a polycentric world. A polycentric world is better for some people than a world dominated by capitalists in New York. Okay? When deglobalization happened before, it was a good thing for Brazil. It was a good thing for Latin America. Latin America industrialized because the core wasn't around to provide all of that for them. So, and it could be like that again, right? It could be an opportunity for some people. I don't know what it will be like. I don't even know what's actually happening. Okay, all I'd say is there's something going on that may be going on here, and we really won't know for 4 or 5 or 6 more years whether this is really a downward trend or not. But if it is a downward trend, we got to start thinking in a different way. Okay. All right. Well, this is hello. Okay, so the big idea. So the problem I'm raising is I want to think through the issue of the structure now of a global political organization for the left. You can call it a global political party, but we probably shouldn't use the word party because young people don't like that word. That word took a big hit, didn't it? So let's just call it a political organization. And I came up with a word for this, the vessel. But I don't really care about that word one way or the other. It's kind of a ambiguous signifier, as we say, okay? The real question is, what is the content of this thing? And so I'm trying to think organizationally how to combine horizontalism and some level of hierarchy. And how does this work organizationally in terms of, now there's a bunch of different discourses here. I already mentioned the literature that talks about the advantages of horizontalism, and there are many, and that's why I don't want to get rid of it. We want to encourage prefiguration and horizontalism, but we want to link the horizontal groups to one another in a way that allows them to help each other and coordinate their activities so that they can be involved in global politics and carry out projects and cooperate with each other and help each other. That's the idea. There's the notion of diagonalism. I've read the literature on diagonalism. There isn't much literature to read. It's mostly, political theorists are not my favorite people, I've got to say. Okay? I'm sort of a structural sociologist. I don't really read political theory most of the time. And I got pretty sickened by, postmodernism and post-structuralism and all that stuff. So I sort of stopped reading it because it sort of seems sort of silly. There's some kind of entertainment going on for some other people, not for me. So, but I have been reading more of it lately because we do need to come to grips with this. Postmodernism happened. I think it probably happened here too, okay? So we can't just ignore that. We need to deal with it. It undercut the ability of critical intellectuals to relate to social movements in a huge way. So we do have to deal with it, and we need to figure out what happened philosophically, but also what happened politically, and counteract that. We've got to do this. The diagonalism idea is an attempt to do that, but frankly it's not very well worked out because there are a lot of problems. It's clear that we don't want a super hierarchical organizational structure, okay? What's a hierarchical organizational structure? The army. You've got to wear your little uniform, and you've got to sleep together and all around, and worry about it. So we know what that looks like. We don't want that. On the other hand, we want some kind of hierarchy that represents, that is democratic, that represents what's going on down below, that people have some access to the leadership. Now, there's a whole interesting discourse that came out of feminist politics about structuralness that I review. Okay. If you don't have formal structure, basically what you have is informal structures, which could be just as bad as formal structures. It's a bunch of friends. And the problem with that is there's no recourse. You can't do anything about it because there's no structure for people who aren't in the friendship clique to deal with the friendship clique. So you need to have some kind of formal way of representing people, or delegations of representation in a complex system. I'm talking about a global system, so we have to figure out how to do this, okay? There's a big discourse in political theory about delegation and representation. I don't know how many of you know about this. It's something anarchists talk a lot about, okay? It's about how much autonomy the person who's supposed to represent this subgroup has, or not. A delegate doesn't have autonomy. A delegate doesn't really make independent decisions. A delegate has to go back to the original group and say, well, so there's the deal, and explain it all to them, and then, you know, have them tell them what to do, and then they go do it. A representative, on the other hand, has autonomy, okay? Is supposed to be an autonomous decision maker with some resources of his or her own, and doesn't have to just do what the people down below want. So there's various ways to mix and match those two things, but those are two very different ways of creating a centralized structure. The other issue is how centralized do they have to be, and how bureaucratic one is. The word bureaucracy is anathema. It's like the word party. Okay? Whatever we do, we can't do that. But we need also to take into account the culture of young people. And frankly, they're very individualistic. They spend most of their time playing around with their phones. And we have to take this into account. Okay? This is a consequence of the development of world capitalism and its technologies, but it's a real consequence. And that's the world that we have to create political action in. And it's probably going to survive all these crises and stuff, because people like it. They like to do it. They like the freedom to tweet. I don't tweet myself. I've never tweeted, but we usually tweet. There's people have a notion of freedom, and it's an important thing, and they want that. And postmodernism and post-structuralism did play to that big time, okay? But it also eliminated the possibility of counter-hegemony and all that. What we need to do is incorporate those things and those cultural aspects into a project that allows people to cooperate with one another and really contest with power for power in the world. I don't myself know what this really means, okay? It's the beginning of an idea. So, I need help here, okay? I'm reading more political theory than I ever thought I would read. I'm also understanding Foucault and a bunch of stuff more than I ever did before, okay? And I also see that, you know, it's not all bad. It is a consequence of the 68. There is a liberatory thing there, okay? The big idea, which is that language is power and constrains us on an individual level. That's basically true. But does that mean we don't have to contest for meaning and for real power in the world beyond language? No, I don't think it means that. It means that we also need to be aware that a bunch of structures aren't dealt with, at least by traditional Marxism and the revolution of 1917. A bunch of things that have happened were not capable to deal with in that discourse. So we need a new discourse here. We need to understand better the issue of agency. Who's the agent? Oh, I didn't mention the precariat and all that. Okay, we're not dealing with the proletariat anymore, I'm dealing with the precariat now. It's a different thing. Flexible specialization capitalism creates a new kind of working class. And it's not the old kind anymore. You can't just organize the factories and stuff like that. You have to go figure out, people don't even relate to their occupations and stuff. They're not particularly workers, and the workplace is not a main focus of political contestation. That said, we can't forget about the people who really are still workers in the old sense. Okay, they're important too. We need to recognize the plight of workers and workers' rights and contest in that world. On the other hand, to pretend like that's the whole world, that's a mistake. It's not. The world of the precariat is what's happening. I'm not sure how much it's happening here, but I think it is among young people. Okay? I know what's going on in the United States. It's a whole different thing. They don't see their occupation and work in the usual sense as the center of their lives anymore. It's a different thing now. They have stuff they're doing, and projects of their own, and so on, and that's the world that we have to appeal to politically. We have to do it. Now that, you can take that to its ultimate conclusion and say, well, it's the new agent. The working class, the Marxist proletariat working class was the agent of the revolution in 1917. Who's the agent now? And I've read different people who are trying to think this through who have different words for that. But it's the intelligent human being, or it's the meta-humanist, or something. There's different languages involved here. But I think they're right. We do need to rethink the issue of agency. Okay? For our own time. We need to do what Gramsci did, but for now. We need to think, how does politics work in our context? And how can we mobilize something that uses the meanings that already exist in people's beliefs to create something that can carry us through to both survive and create a better world for the human species. I think we can do this, maybe. And you know what, I think even if we bomb the shit out of ourselves and kill practically everybody off and a whole bunch of people starve to death, sooner or later we'll kind of get back to the same place we are now. Okay? That's what long-term evolution shows me. Yeah, systems that get knocked way back, but they don't disappear. They eventually reconstitute themselves and emerge again. So it would be great if we could solve it this time. That would be nice. And maybe we can. If we can't, if it's just 21st century's big shitstorm, well, too bad for you guys. I'm out of here. But you know what? It's really worth a try. And what we do when we do this is create a memory so that the people next time can learn. I think we have an opportunity here to do something really big, but I'm not saying it's easy. We have to deal with a lot of stuff that happened that's really strong, but I think that it can be done.
Queria parabenizar o professor Chase-Dunn pela brilhante palestra, que coloca temas-chave para a esquerda e para os movimentos sociais, que devem enfrentar o neoliberalismo, a deglobalização, as ameaças produzidas pelo fascismo e o risco da guerra, devem atravessar os movimentos sociais à esquerda essas ameaças e construírem um mundo sustentável, inclusivo e democrático para todos. Eu abriria, então, para comentários, perguntas e observações da plateia e, enfim, está aberta a palavra para comentários. Alô?
Em português? Pode ser? Boa tarde, eu agradeço ao professor Christopher pela palestra, pelas reflexões, né, tendo sendo reflexões, né, em construção. Tem várias ponderações, mas vou escolher uma. É o seguinte, as revoluções dos últimos 200 anos, naquele primeiro slide, elas se direcionaram praticamente todas ao Estado-nação. O foco revolucionário foi a transformação das condições sociais, econômicas e políticas direcionadas ao Estado-nação enquanto locus de poder e de organização política. E por uma série de razões, no século XX e XXI, especialmente na segunda metade do século XX, nós vamos ter uma mudança e, se nós olharmos então para o processo do Fórum Social Mundial em si, ele tem um início, né, do 2000 ao 2004, ainda bastante radical, com movimentos mais radicais incluídos, mas uma virada a partir, efetivamente, de 2005 para uma estrutura muito mais baseada em organizações não governamentais, ONGs, e organizações setoriais, reivindicando muito mais esse pluralismo de representação do que um foco político concreto no Estado Nacional. Inclusive, muito da discussão inicial foi que o Estado não seria mais esse locus de poder, a ideia não seria mais tomar o Estado. Isso muda fundamentalmente a direção dos movimentos sociais. Se eles não se direcionam ao Estado, então a quem e aonde? Então eu queria que, se possível, fosse comentado e obviamente, colocado em discussão.
Boa tarde, professor. Queria agradecer pela palestra. Eu tenho uma dúvida em relação aos novos movimentos de extrema esquerda que têm surgido recentemente nos Estados Unidos. Eu venho acompanhando, por exemplo, o caso dos antifascistas, como o senhor mencionou, até lá em Berkeley, né, que houve recentemente alguns confrontos com os apoiadores do Trump e outros grupos de extrema-direita racista e tudo mais. E aparentemente vem acontecendo um crescente, uma escalada nos conflitos, indo para o nível da violência física mesmo, que acho que é uma coisa inédita de acontecer esse embate físico entre extrema-direita e extrema-esquerda nos Estados Unidos nos últimos anos. E aparentemente o discurso anticapitalista tem ganhado mais espaço entre os jovens nos Estados Unidos, acho que principalmente das gerações de filhos de imigrantes, mas ao mesmo tempo a estrutura política dos Estados Unidos não reflete essa nova parte política que vem surgindo. O bipartidarismo parece que não dá um espaço, até a campanha do Bernie Sanders representou bastante isso, né, nas primárias. O que o senhor acha qual seria uma perspectiva organizada para essa nova esquerda norte-americana, para influenciar dentro do sistema político americano e também para ela ser uma importante força na sua proposta do Wessel, né, nessa proposta de uma articulação internacional de uma nova esquerda?
Primeiro, parabenizar, né, ter posto aí a agenda da esquerda para o século XXI e um pouco retomar um dos pontos que você falou, que é a questão do horizontalismo, né? A minha pergunta é sobre horizontalismo e eficácia, né? Porque a gente, comparando aqui o que está lá no LEMARX, né, no que fazer, que é o que orienta a organização da esquerda no século XX, e se aponta um horizontalismo aí como alternativa aos problemas que essa metodologia tinha, né? E aí você mesmo falou de o Wall Street, tem aqui no Brasil a jornada de 2013 e a Primavera Árabe, né? Movimentos bastante atravessados por esse horizontalismo. E talvez não seja esse próprio horizontalismo que tenha posto os limites, né, da falta de articulação, da falta de uma pauta única para esses movimentos.
A gente vai fazer
fazer esse bloco de 3 perguntas, ele vai responder, depois a gente abre mais um bloco, tá ok?
Okay, so, yeah. So Anna said the world revolutions were, oh man, I can't do that. She said that the world revolutions were organized toward taking state power. Actually, that became more and more true. I mean, in the 16th century, nation states were just beginning to exist. There were empires that, you know, political organization itself evolves, and still is. And capitalist globalization changed the state a lot. But the point you're making is, I mean, the idea of taking state power was the central idea in the World Revolution of 1917. From a world systems point of view, the state is just an organization, it's not a whole system. So when you take state power, you don't necessarily control everything. It's like taking over any organization, okay? So it's really a tactical issue, a strategic issue. It's not an issue of, once you've taken state power, it's the revolution. It's just the beginning. What happened at the World Social Forum was the idea that this was a bad thing, and that because that's what the Stalinists did and so on, and so the new left rejected the old left and all that. Well, I think that was a mistake, that the pink tide in Latin America saw progressive states. States aren't all the same. It depends on who controls the state and what it is doing and all that. So states can be progressive or not. It depends on who controls it and what they're doing. And so whether you take state power or not is, to me, a tactical and strategic question, not a question of morality or anything, okay? I know that in the left discourse, it became that. Reformism, revolutionaries, and anarchists don't like any state. And the postmodernist and post-structuralist stuff had a big thing about the state and so on. And the anarchists are probably right. States are always, to some extent, repressive. Okay? But they're not all equally repressive. And frankly, some of the things that states do are necessary, even though they're repressive. Okay? So I actually think it would be a good idea for the humans to have a global state. This doesn't get me too far with my anarchist friends when I start talking this way, and I think that eventually we will, but probably not right away, okay? And that I would prefer it be a democratic global state, not a fascist global state, okay? I think we're going there eventually, but not maybe in this century, because it's going to take a long time. So the issue, the main response I want to make is I think it's a tactical and strategic thing, not a moral thing, and that the World Social Forum people wouldn't let people come representing states were overreacting. They're taking too seriously the idea, the new left, that you can't deal with people who are involved with states. I think that's just wrong. I don't see any problem with being involved with electoral politics as long as you don't believe and deceive yourself that this is going to solve everything and it's going to be the revolution and you're going to create a utopia that way. No, you're not. But can you make some things better for some people? Is that part of the revolution too? Yes, I think you. It's the whole issue about reformism and the left been going around and around forever. The other point I would make is, look, social movements need both radicals and reformists. The radicals are the ones that scare the ruling class, and the reformists are the ones who actually get things to really change institutionally, and the two things can work together, and so it's time to let's start figuring this out. Duh. And this is related to the issue about Antifa and all that somebody mentioned, okay? Yeah, we've got young people who use violence against fascists. You know what? It's not really violence, it's sort of symbolic violence. They hit each other with sticks and stuff. You know what real violence is? I think you may know something about this. Real violence is a whole bunch of people get killed. That hasn't happened yet. What you have is people changing the boundaries about how social movements behave with each other and conflict, and it is pushing in the direction of violence, but really it's more symbolic violence than anything else. So I think what's happened with Antifa so far is okay. It scares people, which is good. It gets their attention. It has had an effect on the neo-fascists in the United States. The last demonstration they tried to have in Washington, only 3 of them showed up. Now I think that's mainly because they think their guy is the president. And so that sort of undercuts their willingness to go out and take risks, especially if the Antifa kids are going to come around and clobber them with sticks. But, you know, I don't think, well, I think that we need to have a discourse about violence as a tactic, and that the idea that people who do armed struggle can't even come to the World Social Forum, that was probably a mistake. That sometimes armed struggle is what you should do. Not always, and sometimes you can't do it, and there are other ways, and so it's a tactical issue again. Okay? But just saying, that's over, I'm never going to do that again, I don't know. I mean, really, I don't think that makes sense to do. I think we need to see it as there is an issue about constructing a law and a state and a structure that serves the interests of the people. And that sometimes involves contesting with the powers that be. And sometimes they use violence on you, and that happens, and you got to think about what you're going to do about it. Are you just going to lay down and die? I don't know. Don't quote me here. Am I on television? Hello? I'm just saying I think it's a tactical issue. Right? So there's something going on in the United States. The Antifa question raised that. I had also mentioned it, but I was talking about diverting acts. I see a process going on where the big story of the United States is the left is extremely weak. It's the place in which the precariat thing and the philosophy of postmodernism is strong, not maybe the most strong, but pretty strong, and the consequences of all that have been to disperse the left. On the other hand, we've had some really interesting things, like the Occupy movement that started there and spread all over the world and things like that. We have a strong culture of young people who are anarchists even though they don't know they're anarchists. Okay? Most of them don't know anything about the history of anarchism, which is actually a complicated history. They are, but the culture of the Occupy movement was led by anarchists, and they didn't know the culture of it, but that culture was very popular among the people who went and did the Occupy movement. So that's the culture I'm talking about. We can't ignore that. We need to incorporate the ideas that were involved in that in the project, the counter-hegemonic project that we saw. I don't know what role U.S. politics will play in the larger thing. All I know is whatever happens, it's important for everybody. This is the country that's sitting with its finger on the trigger, right? It's a militarized society. Changing all that is not going to be easy. It's global 911, okay? Most people in the United States are related to either the police or the military in some way. It's imbued in our culture. And all this right-wing stuff plays with it. We have nationalism. Oh, one of the things I was going to try to discuss with you in my paper was the idea of progressive nationalism. This came up a little bit in nationalism is kind of what's happening. It's not everybody abandoning the nation state anymore. That's over. Everybody, the right wing are doing nationalism, and what we need on the left to think about is there a version of progressive nationalism? Now, it's easier to think about this in Brazil, where you just kind of had that, right? In the United States, it's hard to think about it. It's the Colossus of the North. It's the imperial center. What the hell does progressive nationalism look like in a situation like that? But I think we need to think it. Because nationalism is what's happening. If this deglobalization thing is happening like I think it might be, we need to think how what kind of United States would be a useful part of the larger world? Well, one in which it didn't try to run the whole world, probably, but also one in which it actually contributed economically to the needs of the people of the world in a way that could employ people in the United States who need jobs. So this is an industrial policy using the comparative advantages that we have to produce things that people need. I think we need to talk about this. Okay? This is probably going to be part of the discourse of the emerging left part of the Democratic Party. They're going to have to at least talk about that. You know, they don't want to talk about the 782 military bases. But I think we all need, the leftists, we've all, the world citizens, we've all said, well, we're internationalists, you know, we don't think about these things. But I think now we can't ignore nationalism. Nationalism is an institutionalized part of the world system that capitalism had created. It's been getting more and more important for hundreds of years, and now it's kind of like, it's an institution. It's a form of collective organization that is heavily institutionalized, and when things fall apart and there's a crisis, people go back to the collective ideas that they have, and nationalism is one of the main ones. So I don't think it would make sense for the left to ignore this. We need to figure out what we're going to do about it. We can't say, well, we're world citizens and we are internationalists and everybody's great, and humanity's one big thing and everything. Yeah, well, what about the nation state? I think it was a mistake for the world social people to say, we're not going to have anything to do with that. We do need to have it. We need to address it. We need to have something to do with it. We need to involve in national politics, including electoral politics. Is that the revolution? No, not. But it's on the way to, and you can actually help people. That's what you need to do to build a movement of people, of progressive people. You got to do it. So is horizontalism efficient? No. But it has certain advantages. Okay, there's no way of dealing with the problem of efficiency in a horizontal movement. The advantages are it's flexible and it's creative. It allows for new stuff. Okay, it doesn't subject anybody to anything. You can do whatever you want. What you try to do is communicate your successes and your failures across, so that other people find out when you did something that turned out well, or you did something that turned out badly. I know it's not efficient. That's why I'm talking about diagonalism. Okay, because we need to be efficient too. And we need to actually confront power, and you can't do it with a bunch of little groups that don't even communicate with each other. So I agree with that. Now, there's a whole movement of neo-Leninists, okay? In the States, we have Jody Dean, who's writing all these books about crowded party and all that. What I see is she's doing the same thing I'm doing. She's trying to write a book about Leninism and Jacobinism and the need for leadership, which I agree with. But I'm not sure that adds up to the vanguard party. See? We do need to have a new understanding. We also, as intellectuals and academics, understand what is our role regarding this. Okay? Are we the ones that dispense, good ideas and insights and social science and wisdom to the masses, or what is our relationship with the movement? We need to think this through. Right now, I'm talking to you not as a sociologist, I'm talking to you as a citizen. I'm a citizen. I'm a world citizen, citizen of the United States. In that role, it's okay, I do whatever I want. But I'm also an academic in a university, and I'm studying the world system, so I actually could help. I can provide a contextual analysis of what already happened in world history and all that. I can help social movements. We call this public sociology. I do it. Okay? I work with social movements, but I don't tell them what to do. It's not vanguardism. It's not Jacobinism. I'm not saying, I'm the professional revolutionary and you all guys should follow me. On the other hand, I agree with a bunch of things that Lenin figured out. Okay? That by itself, trade unionism is not the revolution. It's better than no trade unionism. It's kind of what we got in the United States now, but it's not the revolution. Okay? It doesn't lead to solving the big problems that humanity has. It just gets a better deal for some workers, which is good, but it's not the revolution. Actually, trade union was a big success in the United States. We got a bigger middle class, people got more stuff, they got their home in the suburbs, all those things, it was okay. But it wasn't the revolution, they just got incorporated into global capitalism in a certain way. So Lenin was right about that. It's not enough to just get people organized so that they can take care of their own interests and stuff. There needs to be a group of people who are looking at the big picture in the long run. And the question is, what is their relationship to the group and all that? So basically, I don't know. One thing I see is we have a big problem here, which is more of a problem of perceptions than anything else. I agree with that the movement needs leadership. The real question is, what is that leadership and how is it legitimated and all that? These are the issues I'm trying to raise. Just a bunch of people declaring themselves as the revolutionary professionals, that doesn't do it. So we need to think this through and do a better job this in a way that doesn't turn off the people we're trying to organize.
Bom, boa tarde. Queria reiterar os agradecimentos ao professor pela exposição. E eu queria retomar um pouquinho o diálogo com a ciência política, né, que o professor falou que voltou a fazer, enfim, especialmente informado pelo Foucault, que também foi citado na palestra, né. E, na verdade, a minha questão é sobre como dialogar essas perspectivas da esquerda global em um cenário que se aponta para um neoliberalismo dominado por uma nova governamentabilidade baseada no biopoder, né? Baseada no poder de matar e de deixar viver. Então, como posicionar a esquerda, como posicionar esses movimentos nessa lógica? E eu faço essa pergunta muito inspirada aqui na situação do Brasil, em que a gente tem tantos líderes sendo assassinados no campo, enfim, no norte do país, aqui no Rio de Janeiro, recentemente, a vereadora LIERI. Então, queria saber do professor como é que ele vê essa questão.
Professor Chase-Dunn, eu queria agradecer bastante pela palestra e pelos comentários. Eu achei bastante delicioso assim, a visão geral e a inspiração geral de construção dessa fonte de frente unida à esquerda. Eu queria que você falasse um pouco mais para a gente. A discussão e o rascunho inicial ficou bastante em torno da estrutura e das formas possíveis organizacionais desse movimento. Eu gostaria que você falasse um pouco mais para a gente sobre quais as possibilidades táticas, estratégicas, um pouco o objetivo geral desse fronte unido, com quem ele estaria dialogando, quais são as lutas possíveis, os frontes possíveis de luta que você vê num plano um pouco mais concreto. Obrigada.
Primeiramente, boa tarde. Eu gostaria de falar sobre a Margaret Thatcher, que tem uma frase que ela diz que a grande vitória dela foi que todas as políticas depois se tornaram thatcheristas. Então, a própria esquerda institucionalizada saiu do campo político e passou a se tornar uma esquerda técnica. E sempre com pautas como contra a corrupção, devemos ter boas gestões. E o que o senhor vê, a pesquisa do senhor, demonstra que a própria esquerda não institucionalizada seguiu uma linha como essa, no momento que eles falam em direitos humanos, mas a gente tem que voltar àquela velha proposta marxista sobre a Declaração dos Direitos dos Homens, onde ele diz que os direitos são formais e não substantivos. Então, como eles pedem direitos humanos, lógico, ninguém é a favor de uma guerra sanguinária, ao mesmo tempo que os Estados Unidos inventa armas químicas no Iraque, usa drones na Líbia, na Síria e fósforo branco, armas proibidas. A esquerda fica no ponto de os direitos humanos e não os direitos substantivos.
O professor vai responder mais esse bloco e depois a gente abre para o último bloco, ok?
So, the issue about violence was mentioned, and one problem is that the rule of law is poorly institutionalized. And this also connects with that last question. Even in the places where it's very strong, like in the United States, we really do have strong political institutions that have been created over a very long period of time, where the courts are somewhat independent of the legislative powers and of the executive powers and all this stuff. All this is being tested right now, okay, by the Trump administration and so on. And even in the best of times, the rule of law was not all that great for everybody. It was mainly great for middle-class people. It's not great for people who were minorities or poor people. The police ended up being an instrument of repression, maintaining the structure of society. And this is even when it's done right, or as well better. In other countries, I know more about Central America, it's mainly a repressive apparatus. It's not really much else. So it's a way of controlling social movements and the labor movement and things like that. People end up dead. So what do you do in a situation like that? Well, I know a lot about Central American politics. You try to mobilize people to defend themselves, but often the state has a lot more power and resources than you do. Nevertheless, you use the institutions you have, and then you figure out how to survive and how to walk the line. There's a line that you have to walk. And it's tricky as to how to stay near the line but not cross over the line. If you cross over the line, you're dead. The other thing I would say is, I already mentioned this point, I think that people have a right to self-defense. It's okay if they assert that right. It's to some extent a practical, an ideological issue, but it's mainly a tactical issue as to when and where you can get away with that. Because if you do it at the wrong point in time, you just get crushed. On the other hand, it's important for people for the left to tell people that you have the right to defend yourself and your family against violence. So just do it. Okay? Although I realize that doesn't work so well everywhere. In the United States, we have a culture of this. Everybody's supposed to have a gun and defend their own family. They're supposed to. It's part of the moral order. Okay? They have the Second Amendment and all this stuff. The issue that Isabella raised about the United Front and stuff. Okay, I read a lot about how United Fronts and Popular Fronts operated in the 20s and 30s and 40s and what went on there. At the very beginning of my talk, I said, you know, we do need to think about United Fronts. It was an important thing of what happened before. It was a reaction against basically the rise of fascism. Fascism rose in Europe, primarily in Italy and Germany, as a response to the left. And in fact, Mussolini was a socialist, okay, who was unhappy because the left had this internationalist line about World War I, and he wanted Italy to go to war in World War I, and he had been in the army too. And so he ended up cracking down on peasant unions and immigrants and doing all of these in order to get going as a movement. But the reaction against fascism, because it was a popular movement. It was not the capitalists that did this. It was nationalists and workers and people that were unhappy with democracy and stuff like that and going anywhere. There were a bunch of marginal people who started it. It wasn't started by capital. The big landowners and capital came in later when they saw the whole fascism was caused by the fact that the left was strong. And the reason that they made an alliance with capitalists and the landowners was because the left was strong. And the capitalists and landowners were afraid they were worth their property to the communists. That's what was going on. And so they figured the fascists were better than the alternative. This is important for now because right-wing movements aren't just sponsored. Sometimes they are sponsored by people with money and power. But they also have real roots from below. There are social movements, and we need to understand that and to get it. Okay? But the other social movement sociologist part of me sees that movements create counter-movements. This happens over and over again. And in the 20th century, it was the left thing. The right was a reaction to it. In the 21st century, the left could be a reaction to the right, just the opposite. The right is stronger than we are right now. Not in Brazil. Brazil is different from the United States and Europe because you have a left. You just have a leftist regime for years. Okay. It is pretty strong. I know you're all unhappy about what's going on, and I get it. And people get being murdered, and it's not good. Things aren't going too well. But you do have an organized left. I'm coming from a place where there is no organized left. The left is a bunch of individuals who basically just think of themselves, have an identity about something, okay? And they don't really do that much together. It's 50 different movements that have different issues and never talk to one another, most of them. Okay? So it's a different context. We need to know the history of United Fronts and Popular Fronts, and we need to be, again, tactical and strategic about it. It's not. Sometimes you make alliances with progressive capitalists. Some people may not want to hear that, but really it's not a crime. It makes sense to do it. It depends on what's going on and what the situation is. Okay? And there are progressive capitalists. In my theory of how revolutions affect the evolution of the world system and its politics, the function of the global left is to scare the powers that be enough that progressive capitalists agree to a reform. Okay, and then they push it through. It's the New Deal. Why did they do the New Deal? Because they were a bunch of good hearts and stuff? No, because they were afraid of communism. That's why they did it. But who did it? The New Dealers were capitalists who were progressive because they were out on the edge. They didn't already have it knocked. It was Western capitalists in the United States. It was A.P. Giannini and Henry J. Kaiser. They were the power behind Roosevelt. And they made a deal about a bunch of things. One of them was, be good to the labor movement. The labor movement is okay. Henry J. Kaiser told his workers to organize their own unions. He was a pro-union capitalist. So there are people like that. Elon Musk might be one, although he's a little whack. Okay? But there are people like that. Okay? There are people who are capitalists, but they're not just capitalists. There's something else going on. And do we need to understand this? On the people on the left? Yeah, we do. We need to be careful here, because we're trying to mobilize a movement of people who are not capitalists. But we also need to know that there are people who have money and power who might be willing to help us sometimes. I think we should probably be thinking about that. Does that mean we just want to be a slave to money and power? No, we don't. Because if we do that, we're never going to get anywhere. Not going to happen. Anyway, the issue of the United Front is a complicated one. But the first thing I started is you can't have a united front if you don't have an organization to make a deal with other organizations. So we've got to create that first. That's job one. And it's a huge, big job because of the issues that are raised. The issue about Margaret Thatcher and everybody's a technical specialist now and she won and everything. Well, Margaret Thatcher was partly right. What we call the left now is an adaptation to neoliberalism, okay? And the leftists, the Democratic Party of the United States is basically neoliberals, okay? Bill Clinton was one. So she's partly right. And human rights is the issue that was raised about substantive versus the form of human rights is a good one. Okay? We need to pay attention to that. My government murders people with drones. No due process. They decide, the president and some other people decide this guy's a bad, and then they wipe out the whole wedding party. What the hell? I'm sorry. Okay. That's not right. I am part of the anti-drone movement, okay? We don't like this. It's murder. That's what it is. Okay. But what is that? What are we claiming? We're claiming there are real human rights and that all the humans on Earth deserve to have those rights. And if the state is going to murder you, it should have to charge you with a crime and bring you before a court and so on. Okay? Is this utopia? No, it's just using the ideas that legitimate the system that we have to try to protect people. But it's important. It's an important point to make. No government has a right to just murder people. Screw that. I'm sorry. I don't care what they say. It's not right. No. Some people in the United States care about stuff like this. Not very many, but some do. It's not. They don't see it as, oh well, no. Another one. Yet another one. This is not right. If you're going to do that, if you're going to murder people, if you're going to do capital punishment, at least it has to be according to the law.
Gente, a gente vai fazer mais uma rodada antes de encerrar.
Boa tarde, muito obrigado pela intervenção. Eu sou o Gabriel, que acabo de acabar meu mestrado aqui na casa. Tem uma pergunta, eu sou italiano, talvez mais relacionada com a situação italiana e europeia que a brasileira, mas vamos lá. Digamos que na minha reconstrução histórica, um pouco, entre 45 e 71, o mundo está organizado com Bretton Woods, com umas fronteiras nacionais clara e marcada, e com uma organização de controle de capitais, do ponto de vista financeiro. Por outro lado, era o momento da Guerra Fria, da confrontação entre Estados Unidos e União Soviética, e também do mundo livre, capitalista, com o mundo comunista. Então, entendo que o capitalismo, nessa fase, tinha a obrigação de demonstrar a sua bondade, ou seja, ser um sistema melhor que o outro. Nessa fase, pelo menos na Europa, se dão grandes lutas sociais, sobretudo a partir dos anos 60. A gente constrói o sistema de saúde nacional, o sistema ótimo e gratuito, o sistema escolar nacional, também um ótimo sistema. Os operários nas fábricas conseguem os contratos nacionais de categorias. Então, digamos, elementos que constituem, digamos, aquele que se chamou depois welfare state. Em uma metáfora que eu inventei, é como se houvesse uma panela no fogo, o capital justamente é o fogo, a panela representa a nossa sociedade. A panela é uma panela de pressão, é uma panela que está fechada. Então, o capitalismo queima abaixo, dentro se produz uma pressão crítica. Chega um momento que essa panela está a ponto de explodir. Os trotskistas dizem, deixa explodir, é a revolução. Também os fascistas, inclusive, colocam bombas para que explodem antes e seja aí o caos total. Claro, os reformistas e a mão da política intervêm naquela válvula, aquele vapor que sai são as reformas. E assim, com essa, se construiu todo o nosso welfare state dentro daquela panela fechada com uma tampa nacional. E claro, do lado da nossa tampa italiana estava a tampa francesa, a tampa alemã e tal. Agora, chega aquela década de 71 a 79, que de repente os Estados Unidos decidem que aquela organização da cozinha não está bem para eles, tem que mudar. Então, de repente, todas as panelas têm que ser abertas e os capitais têm que poder se mover assim entre uma panela e outra e tal. Então, nesse mundo que tem a liberdade total de movimento dos capitais, as fronteiras perdem força, ficam porosas, os estados perdem poder de nascem os atores estatais, tudo isso. Digamos que, sobretudo, o dólar não é mais conversível e Estados Unidos se alia com a China, ou pelo menos se aproxima à China, e aí uma reconfiguração do sistema internacional. A partir daí chegamos a 89, mas já os anos 80 para a Europa são um desastre. Então, todo aquele welfare state que a gente construiu, naquele esquema que não temos tampa, o fogo queima abaixo, o vapor sai, aquela carne que está na panela está queimando, a única coisa que pode fazer o Estado, ou aquela mão, digamos que a política, é botar água, não tem mais o que fazer. E a gente luta, eu nasci em 1970, tenho 48 anos, não sou velho já. Na minha vida, participei de todas as lutas, todas as manifestações que ha havido na Itália e na Europa. Não ganhamos uma luta. Não ganhamos uma luta. Em Gênova, aquele movimento dos movimentos que você justamente representou, aí nos dispararam, nos mataram um cara aí entre a gente. A única luta real que ganhamos foi um referendo contra a privatização da água, que depois foi tranquilamente esquecido, ou seja, a privatização avança, não tem problema. Agora, dentro agora, depois de 30 anos de globalização neoliberista, ou seja, de panela sem tampa, agora uma sociedade desertificada, uma precarização total, uma situação verdadeiramente desanimadora do ponto de vista político-social, claramente chega o fascismo. O fascismo aí chega como solução, porque a gente já não pode mais, e aí chega o fascismo como solução. Nesse momento, a esquerda disse então, a tampa se configura como fronteira. Por exemplo, na Itália agora estão lutando contra os migrantes. O problema da fronteira, a tampa é fronteira. Temos que fechar nossa fronteira porque nos invadem e tal. Essa necessidade de proteção também tem outro partido que está governando com os fascistas, que é mais para...
Por favor, nós estamos com um tempo apertado.
Eles são mais para, digamos, construir uma proteção social, mas sobretudo a esquerda diz que não, que a gente tem que seguir como uma sociedade aberta. uma sociedade aberta. Ou seja, a esquerda parece que não assume a necessidade daquela tampa lá. Porque a tampa não é só fronteira, não é só proteção. A tampa é também o dispositivo que permite construir uma pressão crítica. A pressão que faz explotar eventualmente a panela. Então, aqui chega a minha pergunta: uma esquerda global, uma luta global, em que panela se coloca? Que pressão crítica podemos construir? Quem tem medo da gente? Eu acho que o medo, os poderes vão ter medo da gente só quando pelo que consigo dentro do sistema nacional. Mas, vamos, espero que você possa me explicar que não é assim. Obrigado, desculpe pelo tempo.
É muito objetivo, porque nós estamos...
Sim, com certeza.
6h30 também.
Claro. Boa tarde a todos. Minha pergunta realmente é meio objetiva. Nós sabemos que há uma série de diferenças entre o que seria o centro e a periferia, e, enfim, também podemos dizer assim, periferia no Sistema-Mundo, né? Diferenças materiais, políticas, e me parece evidente que a dominação, a forma que ela é exercida, tanto no centro como na periferia, é bastante diferente, né? Me parece que a dominação no centro tem um caráter muito mais hegemônico, com uma hegemonia muito mais consolidada e forte do que na periferia, na semi-periferia. Isso tem implicações até em termos de estratégias e táticas de dominação. Me parece que há uma questão de como a esquerda ou como a resistência se coloca em relação a essas estratégias e táticas de dominação, né? Então, a minha pergunta você concordaria que há uma grande diferença nas formas de articulação de resistências entre centro e periferia, ou centro, periferia e semi-periferia, e como a gente pode considerar a conjugação de táticas de resistência bastante diferentes, né, nesses dois âmbitos, nessa sua conceitualização de uma frente unificada, né? Então, como você vê essa diferença de resistência entre esses dois extremos e como elas podem ser conjugadas para se criar uma frente unificada?
Obrigada, professor Dan, pela excelente reflexão, né? Mais que excelente, quero dizer, atual, necessária, né? Agradecer muito a sua fala. Dizer que eu fiz parte da organização do comitê local que efetivamente organizava o Fórum Social Mundial de 2001 a 2005. E problematizar um pouco, na verdade, ter a oportunidade de conversar com o senhor sobre a questão dos governos progressistas e seu papel na organização do Fórum. Eu tenho grande acordo de que governos populares, como dizia o Marini, podem cumprir um papel importante na construção de condições mais favoráveis aos movimentos sociais, aos lutadores, às lutas emancipatórias, sem que nisso possam substituir os sujeitos nesse processo, até porque o caráter do Estado, nós sabemos, tem um caráter de classe. Então, assim, problematizando um pouco essa questão da potencialidade do Fórum Social Mundial como um laboratório para se pensar uma organização política internacional, ou uma quinta internacional, como o senhor chamou. Todos os esforços por uma organização mais permanente, que permitisse um intercâmbio permanente de experiências e uma articulação mais efetiva dos movimentos sociais no âmbito do Fórum Social Mundial, foram combatidas por parte do governo progressista que dirigiu o país a partir de 2013 no Brasil. E um caso concreto, eu fui coordenadora de um projeto que articulou inúmeras organizações internacionais em torno de um projeto da Rede Social Mundial, que tinha muito esse perfil que o senhor está falando aí, como necessário, e onde nós somos paralisados. Nós somos paralisados sempre por uma indisposição das ONGs, apoiadas por este governo, quando se necessitava avançar para o caráter anti-imperialista das lutas, anticapitalista das lutas. Havia, digamos, uma disposição de articulação e de apoio, inclusive financeiro, sempre que essas pautas não ultrapassassem um certo limite. Digo isso porque eu participei intensamente desse processo e vi com muita tristeza, a partir de 2005, os rumos que o Fórum Social Mundial assumiu. Qual foi a fortaleza do Fórum Social Mundial, do meu ponto de vista, que me parece uma experiência, o que fica dessa experiência como legado, que deve ser considerado num projeto futuro, na minha opinião, né? A sua capacidade de articulação de uma pauta anual unificada em escala mundial. Eu acho que isso foi uma conquista que nós tivemos naquele período, mais forte naquele período, acho que hoje está fragilizado, no que restou do Fórum Social Mundial. Um caráter plural e democrático no processo de construção dessa pauta, né? E, sobretudo, o caráter auto-organizativo que se implementou a partir de 2012, muito em função da experiência de Porto Alegre, que permitiu uma articulação por temas e por regiões de forma mais permanente. Mas eu penso que um salto organizativo do fórum, de algo parecido como uma organização mundial, deveria ser capaz de reforçar, em primeiro lugar, reforçar esse caráter internacional com uma articulação mais permanente, reforçar a autonomia financeira dessas iniciativas e dessa organização, porque o financiamento por parte de organismos internacionais e de governos progressistas que se vão e vêm, me parece que cria uma instabilidade muito grande nesses processos. E essa articulação ela não pode ser superestrutural, ela precisa se enraizar socialmente, com mais capacidade do que teve até então, até agora. E para isso, um aspecto me parece fundamental. Enfrentar um problema no âmbito já que estamos falando de esquerda mundial, que é a burocratização de grande parte das atuais direções políticas das organizações sociais, seja ela por um processo que envolve a própria cooptação e mediatização de algumas lideranças que acabam se tornando, parece que permanentes, e, enfim. E nesse sentido, eu colocaria uma questão para o senhor, se o pulo do gato não implica em disputar, em compreender a necessidade de uma disputa efetiva do poder, né? Não simplesmente do poder estatal, mas do poder, das relações de poder, né? Uma compreensão mais clara do caráter do Estado e do que é a disputa pelo poder em escala mundial, que se compreenda também como um processo internacional. Então, um pouco a minha questão seria essa, né? Quais os nossos desafios teórico-político-organizativos, considerando esse pequeno balanço que eu apresento aqui, também a sua colocação. Obrigada.
So, agree with Gabriel's description of what happened since 1945, pretty much. I don't think there's too much to add to that. I mean, he raised the issue of, which came up in some of the other comments about contradictions between the global north and the global south, and the issue of immigrants from the global south and all that. It's a huge issue in Italy. The only, and I don't disagree with what he says. I mean, the situation in Italy is the right is doing what it did, the fascists are doing what they did before, using immigrants as an excuse to gain political power. That said, what happened since 2012 in Italy wasn't fair, okay? So there's a reason why this is being used by politicians to get support from people. The issue of the global south and the global north is a global issue. Italy just happened to be in the bullseye of all these people that were trying to get out of Africa for economic reasons and refugees from the war in Syria. So a lot of this huge wave of immigration ended up in Italy. Now, being a member of the left that you mentioned, I think it would be nice if we had a world in which all the humans were taken care of and everything, and we have to help do that. But we also have to recognize the reality of the global north-south inequality in the world, which is huge, okay? Those of us who study global inequality know what happens, which is that most people don't really understand that. In the United States, people who are homeless are in the top 10% of the people of the world in terms of income, okay? But people in California who are homeless don't think of themselves as in the top 10% of the global income distribution, but they are. So we need to get people who are stuck in the national idea about, you know, what's going on politically in the world to understand that actually they're just part of a larger world which is interdependent. And that the reason the global south is the way it is because of the historical process of the relationship between the global north and the global south. And that we do all bear a responsibility for what's happening in the global south too. And that needs to be a plan that deals with this. And we can't forget the demographic situation, which is that the population of the Earth is now 8 billion people. It's going to continue going up to either 10 or 12 billion. And the additional people are mainly coming from 8 countries, most of them in Africa, that are not developing. There's no jobs, and their birth rate is still high, and those people are going to want to go somewhere. That's the reality, and the left has to confront this and figure it out. Okay, not just the left, everybody does. We need to have a way of dealing with that. Now this is what EU and the politicians in Europe have been trying to do, but they need to do it better. And the Italians are right to be unhappy about how it all ended up on their head. Okay, so this is what's going on in politics. But there's room for progressive politics in this too. One is to start with understanding the situation. And then 2, what are we going to do about it? And there are different situations. Can everybody in the global south move to the global north? No. So the solution is to really develop the economies of the global south so that people have enough resources there so that they don't need to move. What's going on now is the Italians and the Europeans are funding states in Africa to keep the immigrants from leaving Africa. That's what's going on, okay? It's not a development project, it's a police project. Well, that's not good. That's where the money is. Some of you were asking, where's the money? The money is in stuff like that. It's support for the police and the armies and stuff to keep people from leaving Africa. That's why it fell off. But this is not over, okay? it's going to be a situation that's going to be affecting the world for the next 50 years, or the next 40 years, whatever. And then it's still going to be a problem because, frankly, a world of 12 billion people is too many people for this earth. And we can say, well, it's just the right way to talk about something like that. Well, you know what? We all need to get it. The earth can only support so many people. Now, maybe technology will solve all these problems, but it hasn't solved them yet. And maybe it someday will, and it'll be not too many people, but there are some serious demographic issues here that we tend to ignore. Treat it as just the Rockefeller Foundation that mentions this and stuff, but we have to understand this. There's a demographic situation that the humans have created. We're the most successful megafauna ever. We're a big animal. We use a lot of resources. People in the global north use 12 times more resources than people in the global south. So part of the climate crisis and the climate change and stuff is about that. This is the other big crisis that we have to deal with. The left has to deal with it too. We've got to deal with it. We're wrecking the biosphere of the earth. And so these problems have to be confronted. And we need a plan for dealing with it. So, really good points about how it's different in the center and the periphery. From the world system perspective, we distinguish between the core, the semi-periphery, and the periphery. The semi-periphery is in the middle. Brazil is in the semi-periphery, it's not in the periphery. Okay? But that's just a slightly more complicated way of thinking about a hierarchy, which everybody now calls the global north and global south. The global south is really two things, it's not one thing. So your question is actually more complicated than the way you stated it, okay? Because is there one size that fits all for everybody when the situations are rather different? And the situation that what you said was actually the global capitalist system is more institutionalized and stronger in the global north than it is in the global south. You're right. It's the semi-periphery that has opportunities here that other people don't have. And that's why the pink tide happened, okay? So Latin America is mostly semi-periphery. Look at a map that shows, when we do the political economy of the world system, we show this map about where is the semi-periphery and where is the periphery and where is the core. Latin America is mostly semi-periphery. So when the Chinese bought all those raw materials and all those soybeans and all that oil and stuff and the price went up, progressive governments were able to come to power and use some of that money rather than just taking it to Miami and buying cars. They used some of that money for the welfare state in Brazil, which was a good thing. The semi-periphery, in my study of the evolution of world systems, is a location where new stuff can emerge. It generally, over and over again, things that transform world systems come out of the semi-periphery, okay? So, now, how does this affect the question you raised about aren't there different forms of organization that would be appropriate? Yes, there are, and we don't need to think about a one-size-fits-all. But what I'm talking about is, what is the structure of that thing that helps coordinate those things? You see what I'm saying? Yeah. And how should that be structured? What we know about the World Social Forum and stuff is it came out of the semi-periphery, didn't it? Yeah, it wasn't perfect and everything, but that's where it came from. It came out of the pink tide. And was it perfect? No, it wasn't, but things like that will continue to happen. People who study the BRICS and all that, you know, this is what's going on in world politics. We need to get it. Both new forms of capitalism and new forms of socialism and new forms of fascism are emerging at the same time. And these things co-evolve with each other. Okay? That's the way it's always been. That's the way it is this time. So is there progress, or we just go around in a great cycle? No, I think there actually is progress. Good things happen in earlier world revolutions. You know what? The world made slavery illegal. Does that mean there's no slavery anymore? No, there's things that are like slavery. You know what? You still can't buy and sell anybody, can you? Try it. It's illegal, and the law will be enforced. Does that mean there aren't anything institutions that are almost like that? No, there aren't. But that's gone. How did that happen? Was it just people realized how stupid it was? No, it took thousands of years. It wasn't stupid at all. It was just part of the social structure. Everybody thought it was fine. And then a bunch of social movements emerged in different places, and they said, you know what, that's not fine. We have these rules about humanity, about human rights, and it applies to everybody, not just those people. So there has been progress. There will be progress in the future. Is it going to be utopia? No, but utopian ideas are important. Why? Because they motivate people to do things and get up off their ass and stop looking at their phone or just going to the beach. Okay, that's why they're important ideas, because people can imagine that there can be a transformative and qualitatively better world. And it makes them do things. Does that world ever really arrive? Yeah, maybe not. By the time we get to a place where we can try to make that decision, there will be a whole new set of problems that we have to solve. Because human social change and technological change and everything throws up new problems all the time. There will never be a stasis of a utopian world. That's not going to happen. Okay? If we survive as a species, this is science fiction, I don't want to get into it, right? So really good points about the World Social Forum, and we need to talk. I agree with what you said. And I know that the problem of resources is a huge problem, right? It does put constraints on organizations. This is why the European autonomous movement emerged. And it was part of one of the consequences of the World Revolution of 1968. Okay? Organizations that take money from the state end up just kind of reproducing the system, and that's true. And NGOs have the same problem. The only thing I would say about that is that there's different kinds of NGOs. They're not all the same. It's not one size fits all. Some NGOs or things like that are already global political parties that make rules about this. So the Global Party of Farmers won't let sociologists join. Because why? Because they want a party of farmers. They don't want a bunch of sociologists at their party. Okay, organizations figure out how to protect themselves. And if they have truly revolutionary or utopian goals, they'll figure out how to not be compromised. Now, sometimes it means you don't have any money. Okay? Do you really need money? Money is just a bunch of crap, too. It is helpful sometimes. You can do things if you have money that you can't do if you don't have it. But the idea that you gotta have money, you don't have to have money. You can do a lot of things with no money. And we already do. Most voluntary associations don't have any money. Social movements come out of voluntary associations. Nobody's paid. It's a bunch of volunteers. People just doing what they think they should do. Okay? That's the world of social movements. Now, do organizations end up playing a role? Because you're going to have a global meeting, you're going to fly people from Africa to Brazil, and that costs a lot of money, and so on? Yeah, you do. But you know what? We have things now, we have tools that we didn't have before. You can have a global meeting without everybody having to fly to Porto Alegre, can't you? And this idea about flying all around and everything, that's probably going to go away anyway. It's too expensive, and it craps up the universe. It burns up a bunch of fossil fuel and everything. We're going to have to figure out how to have meetings like this one, where I'm in Riverside and you're here. Can we do this? Yeah, we can. Where's my phone? We can do it now. And the technology is rapidly advancing. Also, language. Okay? I'm speaking English, you're speaking Portuguese. We have these people who are great translators here, but you know what? They're going to be soon replaced by machines, and the machines are going to do a good job. So the cost of communication is going way down. And right now, anyway, this is not controlled by states and repressive apparatus. Now, there's a big struggle about that, isn't there? And we need to be part of that struggle. We need to keep these things free and open politically. And that's a huge issue right now. That's happening. And we need to ally with it. There's a progressive group of communist techies. They don't call themselves communists, but they are. They think everything should be free. What is that? It's communism. Okay? Information technology is weird. It's not like other things. Basically, the cost of replicating it is free. Well, the logic of that goes against markets, it goes against money, it goes against ownership, it undermines capitalism. And the more and more we move into an information economy, the more we have the basis for a whole different world in which you don't have to work for money. You just do projects that you want to do and cooperate with other people and do things for them and they do things for you. We call it the sharing economy. Okay? This is part of this world of horizontalism and stuff like that. This is why we can't just ignore this. Some people think that's post-capitalism. That's how capitalism ends. That world takes over. The only problem I see with that is, I think that's a good idea. The problem I see with that is, there's a whole bunch of people that can't be computer programmers. I don't know if all you can be computer programmers, but there's a bunch of people that just aren't going to be able to do that. So we need to have something for them to do too. So the world of commodities and wage labor and all that is not going away real soon. It's going to be around for a while anyway. Okay? And we need, our politics need to have both of these things going on. We need to protect the rights of workers, but we also need to understand that work itself is on the way out. It's going. Wage labor is going out of here. And it's a good thing. It was a dumb thing anyway. Okay? Can we do this right away? No, we can't. But we can eventually do it. You raised a lot of other issues about the World Social Forum, and I want to talk to you about it. I also want to talk to you about the future of the World Social Forum. So I'm not sure if you've been involved in it recently, but that's it.
Agradecer fortemente ao professor Chase-Dunn pela excelente palestra que pronunciou aqui para nós, pelas instigantes proposições e reflexões que serão certamente tomadas muito em consideração pelos nossos grupos de pesquisa. Eu convido a plateia para a próxima mesa, que vai ser às 6h30, e que se intitula Imperialismo, Crise do Capitalismo Contemporâneo e as Transformações do Sistema-Mundo, rumo ao caos sistêmico, é a pergunta. Essa mesa vai contar com a presença da professora Virgínia Fontes, da UF, do professor Pedro Vieira, da Universidade Federal de Santa Catarina, e com a minha presença também. E será coordenada pelo professor Wilson Vieira, representando o Instituto de Economia e também o CCJE. Muito obrigado. Nós faremos uma pequena pausa. Perdão? Bom, nós avançamos um pouquinho na hora, uns 15 minutinhos de intervalo. Rápido.